Here is a list of 10 things that I do differently now that I live in the Netherlands. Number 1, walking or biking everywhere. I no longer have a car here. I always had a car when I lived in the United States. I needed a car, most people do. The distances are much larger to cover, and there really is no adequate public transportation system set up in order to achieve a commute. So that's something that I really appreciate about living here in the Netherlands. I sold my car within some months after moving here. I didn't bring my car with me, obviously, but it's something that I do not miss in the least. I am happy to be free of all of the associated obligations of car ownership, the monthly fees and the taxes and the fuel and the maintenance and parking. So that is definitely a difference. For everything where I live here in Haarlem, I can walk or bike. I can walk to my doctor's office, to my dentist, to the cinema, to the post office, to any number of grocery stores and shops, to various parks. And if I want to go a little bit farther afield, I just get on my bike and cycle to, for example, the North Sea, or maybe even into Amsterdam. Number 2, relating to my previous comment, is that I use public transportation. I rely entirely on public transportation. Occasionally, very, very occasionally, I would say rarely, do we rent a car to, say, maybe take a trip to Belgium or drive as far as France or into Germany or something special like that. But in general, for my travels within the Netherlands, I take a train or a tram or a bus. The country is so well connected and it's so easy to use. Especially now, you can just get into a train, tram, or bus and flash your PIN pass or your bank card, your credit card, and pay your way. It's easy, seamless, and reliable. Number 3 is that I now think in terms of Celsius and the metric system as a whole in terms of square meters instead of square feet. When I think of the temperature, I have to say that in the beginning, it took me some time to get my mind around the fact that 23 degrees is a beautiful temperature and is enticing to get up and out and maybe cycle to the sea, for example. And back when I was in the United States, 23 degrees Fahrenheit obviously would not be such a great temperature. And in fact, you would most likely be hunkered down at home, maybe before a fire and sipping hot cocoa. So I find it interesting that the Fahrenheit system, which is still used by the United States, was in fact invented by the Polish-born Daniel Gabriel Fahrenheit. He was born in 1686, and in 1701 tragedy struck and he lost both his parents because they ate, I believe, poisonous mushrooms. And he then moved to the Netherlands. So he is the inventor of the mercury thermometer and the Fahrenheit system, which, as I say, is ironic because it's not used in either Poland or the Netherlands. We did make an attempt to shift, by the way, to the metric system in 1975 in the United States under President Carter. And I still remember in school that all of us were having to learn the metric system. And by the mid-70s, even car manufacturers were issuing automobiles with a speedometer in both kilometers and miles. So we were well underway. In fact, to this day, there is still a stretch of highway that runs from Tucson, Arizona into Mexico, and it is still marked along the way in kilometers. There was a major resistance in the 70s by various people, including the famous author Tom Wolfe, who really reacted against the concept of introducing the metric system into the United States. And, well, it obviously never happened. We still think in terms of miles and square feet and inches. So that's just the way it is. Number 4 is that I take the work-life balance much more seriously. And I remember when I lived in the United States, in Washington, D.C., the first question that I was so often asked was, "What do you do?" Which is so disheartening, really, as if the measure of a man is what he does as an occupation. And I often responded at the time, just to kind of shut down the conversation, "I'm a poet," because at that time I was, and it did shut down the conversations more times than not. I remember it seemed to me that everyone in Washington, D.C. was either a lawyer or a politician, in some cases both. So it's something I really am happy to have disengaged from, the whole go-getter mentality and the concept of climbing the corporate ladder and chasing after the next big gain, which was just so often the case in the United States, seeking a bigger house or a newer car. We have the idea of keeping up with the Joneses, which is really about keeping an eye on your neighbor, and if your neighbor buys a new car, for example, well, then you're hell-bent on buying a new car yourself so that you can keep up with the Joneses. So I'm just so glad to be free from all of that, and that is definitely something that I genuinely appreciate about my life here in the Netherlands, and that is the work-life balance. Number 6 is that I have come to appreciate the peace and quiet of this country, or at least where I live, and the slower pace of life. I'm reminded of a friend that I have who frequently visits from London, and one time he was here and I was complaining about the noise of a neighbor. I could hear the footsteps above, and I was a little bit bent out of shape by that, and he said, "My God, I don't think you realize how quiet it is here." He says that he gets the best sleeps of his life when he visits me here. And it's true, when my mother visited, she commented on the fact that looking out my front windows, that I think for an entire hour or so, she never saw a single car pass. It's a very quiet street, and I'm in a residential neighborhood, and it's not really a through street, so you're not likely to have traffic, through traffic coming along. So again, I just really love the fact that I can live in peace and quiet, and again, relating to that, the slower pace of life. It's just more relaxed here. I don't feel the intensity and the pace of things that I really did experience living in the United States. Number 7 is that I go grocery shopping more frequently. In fact, I pretty much go on a daily basis. If I'm not at the market on Saturdays buying homemade pasta and fresh vegetables and fruit, I'm at the Eco Plaza getting something for lunch, and I really like that. I have a much smaller refrigerator here in the Netherlands than I ever did in the United States. That's a big difference, and I think it's for the good, because it inspires me to shop regularly, which means that I'm getting fresh ingredients and I'm getting food for that particular day. There's far less waste, and as a result, I also eat more healthily. So I am now grocery shopping regularly. A friend asked me, he's like, "Well, what do you do when you have, big bottles of water to trudge back? How do you do that if you're on foot?" And I say, I don't buy big bottles of water. I don't have bottled water in my house. I have actually a Brita water filter, but to be honest, that's not even necessary. The Netherlands prides itself on the fact that it has some of the best drinking water in the world. So you can stroll right over to your faucet and pour yourself a glass of delicious water and indulge. Number 8 on my list is that I tip less frequently and a smaller percentage when I do tip. Tipping has become absolutely out of control in the United States. It was always something that we did customarily. You would normally leave a 15% tip, 20% if you really liked the service or the food, and that was the norm. But I noticed the last time that I was there, everywhere I went, as you paid, there was a request for a tip, either in the form of a tip jar, which is optional, but sort of more directly when you're paying electronically on the machine, the first screen that you would encounter is a suggestion of a tip. I experienced that even in a pizza parlor where I went in and bought a slice of pizza. The person handed me the slice of pizza, and there was, again, when paying electronically, a request for a tip. And I think, for what? There was very limited service, and it really has gotten out of control in the United States. And I did have to get used to the idea of not tipping when I first came here to this country, or not tipping as much, because it just made me feel guilty. And I thought, oh God, you know, they're going to be very upset, these hardworking waiters and waitresses, if I don't tip them. Well, over time I got used to the fact, and my Dutch friends would remind me that really it's not necessary, it's not expected, and if you wish, you can kind of round up your bill and maybe leave a few euro, but certainly not in the neighborhood of 15 and 20%. So that's something that I'm definitely doing differently. Number 9 is that I'm recycling more carefully. I'm much more conscious of recycling than I ever was in the United States. Here, I'm focused on recycling my paper and my plastic and glass and even compost. And I just think that that is the way it should be everywhere in the world for environmental reasons. So I'm really happy to have that supported here in this country, and it has definitely changed my perspective and changed my daily habits. Number 10 is that I complain more. I definitely am fully integrated in that regard, and I've assumed the Dutch habit of complaining, especially about the weather. It is such an obvious thing to complain about here, and we have a lot of fantastic complaint-worthy weather in the Netherlands. For example, in the wintertime, where I am right now, really from the months of November, December, January, into February, the days are kind of gloomy and they're very short, and it's mostly dark in any 24-hour period. Most of that time is under the shroud of darkness, and even in the light of day, it is really often not particularly sunny. So that gives me something to complain about, and I know that that's a way in which I am more Dutch than perhaps American. So there you have it, 10 things that I do differently now that I live in the Netherlands. I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to thank you again for watching my videos, and I appreciate all your comments. As always, I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Take care.